Welcome with Stargazing in the City. You're at the right place if you want to know more about space, stargazing as a hobby, or more technical topics such as astrophotography. In this video I want to take a look at how we can visually look at the nearest star. Usually when I ask people what the nearest star actually is, they think for a while and then mention names such as Proxima Centauri or Sirius or Aldebaran or something like that. Although it's quite impressive that people know the names of those stars, in fact the nearest star of course is the Sun. So if you want to look at the nearest star, you really want to look at the Sun. So this video is really about how we can use our instruments such as telescopes to take a look at features that are visible on the Sun. The easiest way to look at the Sun is by projecting the image of the Sun using a telescope and an eyepiece on a piece of cardboard or paper like this. This is called eyepiece projection. This way you get an image of the Sun in normal light, and it allows you to see sunspot and, if you're very lucky, some granulation on the surface of the Sun. However, it's not possible really to see any features above the surface of the Sun. That requires different methods. Be aware that if you use eyepiece projection that you remove your finder scope, because that might accidentally also bring sunlight into your eye of those of other people that look at the Sun using your telescope. Furthermore, the telescope tends to get pretty hot after a while, so I recommend not doing this too long in a row, but cover up the telescope once every while or move it away from the Sun. Also, using telescopes different from refractors such as Newton's or Cassegrain-Maxetov type of telescopes are not recommended. The inside uses mirrors that can really gather a lot of light and get really hot, and sometimes there are also plastics or other materials used in the interior of these scopes that might melt. So I would recommend only doing eyepiece projection using simple refractors and limit the time that you expose the telescope to the Sun by a minute or so. A second way to observe the Sun through a telescope is by using solar filters. In principle, these come in two flavors. Filters based on foil, like this one, or filters based on glass substrates, like this one. They both basically do the same. They filter out most of the sunlight that comes in, like 99.99 something percent, leaving only a tiny fraction of the light to look at, which makes it safe. Now, in principle, although the color is a little different, this is more like orange in color when you look at the Sun, and this is more like white in color. These filters do not select a specific wavelength in the spectrum. So what you can observe using these filters is in fact the same as what you would observe when you do eyepiece projection. However, these type of filters are more easily to use, they are a lot safer, but also they are optically much more precise than when you project through an eyepiece on a rough surface like paper. So that means you can actually observe finer details using these filters than when you do eyepiece projection. How do you attach a filter like this? Well, basically these foil filters typically come in a frame like this, unless you make them yourself, because you can actually order the film by itself on rolls. But these commercial types come with these little pins, much like a Batinov mask, which I made a different movie on. You can see that you can move these little pins inside and outside, so one frame fits on different sizes. But of course this specific one does not fit all telescopes. Basically you then just push these pins either on the inside of your telescope tube or on the outside, and you can move them until it's securely fit. That's a pretty safe way. I've never really seen any of these filters fall off. Now these foils are pretty strong. Really the only way to destroy them is if you get a sharp object through it, or if the wind gets underneath the filter and it vibrates too strongly, then sometimes they tend to tear on the edge of the ring. But basically, if you store them carefully and you use them wisely, you can easily use such foil filters for years. Now, the glass filters are a little bit heavier, so they typically do not come with these little pins, but they just have a specific size on the inside which you can adjust using Velcro tape. You basically just slide these glass filters on the end of your tube like this, and they're typically pretty secure. As you can see, these filters reflect almost all the light, so towards the end of your telescope where the eyepiece is, you just end up with less than 1% of the light, which makes it safe to look at the sun. The third way to look at the sun, besides eyepiece projection and using white light filters, is to buy a dedicated solar telescope or specific solar wedges that you can use in normal telescopes like the Quark. Either way, these instruments select a specific wavelength in the sunlight. There are many elements in the sun that emit light, but hydrogen is the most important one. And hydrogen alpha emission is usually the spectral line selected in these type of telescopes. Now, what's fun about that is that these type of lines are usually emitted in very energetic regions of the sun. So these type of telescope not only allow you to look at sunspots or the granulation on the sun, but also on energetic features that stick out of the sun, like the hot plasma loops confined by the magnetic field. So these type of telescopes or wedges do broaden the things that you can see on the sun, but the price tag is also quite different, where white light filters typically cost tens of euros or maybe 100, 200 euros. Dedicated solar telescopes typically are 1,000 or several thousands of euros each. So just investing in a normal white light filter, I think, is a very nice way to expand your toolkit for stargazing. Plus, the sun is typically visible a whole lot more than the stars. Well, at least that depends on where you live. But here in Western Europe, we have a lot of cloudy nights, and in summer a lot of more sunny days. So I would really recommend buying a white light sun filter for your telescope.